see from my dress, I represent not only a way of thought, but a way of life. So I'm initiated by a guru. This took place quite a number of years ago in 1972. A guru in one of the very traditional schools of Vedanta in India. And for all these years till now, I have been studying and speaking on this Vedanta philosophy. So I'm here today to give you a kind of not very in-depth overview of some similarities and differences between Vedanta and Western philosophy. I think I should start with explaining this word, Vedanta. I wouldn't be surprised that some of you, most of you, perhaps all of you, have somewhere along the line come across this word. How much you know what it means, that remains to be seen, but let me explain. Veda, Anta, these are the two parts of the word. So, Veda in the Sanskrit language has a very simple meaning, knowledge. But it's not ordinary knowledge. It's actually transcendental knowledge. Knowledge that goes beyond the human capacity for investigation and speculation. Veda also refers to a vast body of texts known as the Vedas. So these Vedic texts, which are written in Sanskrit language and are thousands of years old, these texts transmit this Vedic knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And it's not simply book knowledge alone. This is another important point. That, like the Vedas themselves say, Sampradaya Vihineye Mantra Nishpalamataha, which means that you may get a mantra. Mantra means a sentence or a spiritual formula from the Vedas. You may have such a mantra, you may be chanting it, meditating on it, but it will be nishpal. Nishpal means it won't have the desired result. It won't give the result that you're supposed to get from it unless you have received this mantra by way of what is called sampradaya. Sampradaya means a school of Vedic knowledge. And in India, there are several such sampradayas which are very, very old. Because as I will explain, Vedic knowledge is not just theory, but it entails practice. It entails a process of self-purification, which is necessary to realize this knowledge. And that is what is taught in these sampradayas, in these traditional schools of Vedic knowledge. An entire way of life, which, as I said, I represent not only a point of view, but also a way of life. So I've been practicing this myself for decades now. So that's the meaning of the word Veda. As I said, basically knowledge. Then Anta is very similar in form and in meaning to the English word end. End or conclusion. So Vedanta then is the conclusive knowledge, the point, so to speak, the final point of all Vedic knowledge. Many, many texts, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Tarvaveda, Vedangas, and Upanishads, and so many texts are there. Actually, it's a vast encyclopedia. When European scholars discovered in India the Mahabharata, which is an epic literature from the Vedas. They were really shocked because till then the greatest epic literatures they knew of were the Greek Iliad and Odyssey. And they were surprised that the Mahabharata was so much more voluminous than these two works put together. Many volumes just for one epic text, and there are so many Vedic texts. So it's more than a life study to go through these Vedic literatures. So Vedanta, the purpose of Vedanta is to present, to teach the essence. What is the point of all this? So that we can save time. We don't necessarily have to go all through the Vedic texts to come to the conclusion that the Vedas want to bring us to. So this is Vedanta. And Vedanta is not a monolithic system. As I said, there are different schools, and there are actually different Vedanta philosophies, although they're all based on the Veda. So I should point out that I represent one particular school of Vedanta philosophy. If there's time, I think in the questions, I can speak more about that if you want to go into that in depth. But really what I want to present to you now is, as I said, a basic overview. And Western philosophy. So there was a British philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, who is of the 20th century, earlier part of the 20th century. And he made a statement which I've always thought sums up Western philosophy. He said, all of Western philosophy is simply footnotes to Plato. So if you really want to come to grips with the Western philosophical tradition, that's the best place to start, is go back to Plato and his presentation of the Socratic dialogues. There you get pretty much all of the issues of Western philosophy. And in philosophy today, these same issues are still being debated. So Plato is also a very interesting point to start with. Although I don't think I'm going to talk very much about Plato today, at least in this presentation, because I want to keep it general. This is just for your information. Plato is an interesting place to start because there is actually a good deal of similarity between Platonic ideas and Vedanta. So I want to start with what I think is probably the at least one of, if not the overriding problem of philosophy. It's very major, the mind-matter duality, or mind and body. And unless this can be solved, it's very difficult to make any progress in explaining what reality is, what the world is, what we're here for. So the way I'm going to talk about this has come into my mind from a similar talk I had last week at the University of Turku. And after that talk, I had another talk, a private talk, with a gentleman. He's a lecturer in the science faculty at that university, and he holds a PhD in quantum physics. So we talked about quantum physics in a philosophical way, and I realized from that talk that there too, the same problem is prominent. So I wanted to go into this problem from referring to that talk I had with this quantum physicist. You might find this interesting. I noticed reading today the example of quantum physics is often brought up in many different contexts. So this may be useful. So I want to take the example from quantum physics of what is called complementarity. And this complementarity actually refers to mind and matter, the complement of the two. So what you have in quantum physics is this famous wave-particle duality. When they look at matter, at the elemental ingredients of matter down in even below the microscopic level, then they see matter is behaving simultaneously as a wave or waves and also as particles. And this forms a strange duality because you can't really put the two together. This is the problem. Under certain circumstances, matter behaves like a wave. Other circumstances, it behaves like a particle. So there was one of the founders of quantum physics, the Danish scientist Niels Bohr, who said out of this complementarity, or this duality between waves and particles, what we get is what we can say about nature, not nature itself. We can say that nature sometimes appears to be waves and sometimes appears to be particles, but that is not really nature itself. So this is what I want to talk about. You see, what is separating between the separation between waves and particles is actually our ignorance. It's our human ignorance. We, as human beings, although we can perceive with the help of our scientific instruments these two states of matter, we don't know how they fit together. And since Bohr made this statement in the 1920s, and since that time, science has come no closer, even with the advancement of better and better instruments and more sophisticated experiments. We've come no closer to bridging the gap between waves and particles. So this ignorance seems to be fundamental. It seems to be a human limitation. See, our science, someone may say he believes in science very much, but science is a product of the human intelligence, and human intelligence is not perfect. So in science too, imperfection appears. And so this ignorance is there. And because of this ignorance, then we cannot say that we have arrived at an actual, completely perfect, valid understanding of what nature is. We're just kind of fishing around, groping around, and we come up with this. Yes, sometimes under certain circumstances, certain experiments show that fundamental matter is like a wave, and other times it's like a particle. But we don't know how that fits together. So this is the problem. There's a fundamental ignorance that separates us from reality. There's another, I think, nice example, suitable example, and you'll probably all be able to relate to this because it's very up to date. It's an example of a computer, which I think everyone here is familiar with. So, computer, you use a computer and you're seeing something on the screen. And the screen is your, so to speak, your work table. You're entering things on the keyboard, and that's causing corresponding things to happen on your display screen. Now, what you see on the display screen is a kind of narrative. It's telling you a story. It's telling you a story, and you get your idea from this story, this image on the screen, of what the computer is doing. But actually what the computer is doing, that's down inside the guts of the computer, in the microprocessor and the different chips and different printed circuits and all of that. That's quite different from what you see on the screen. Although there's a relationship, but it's quite a big difference. So the screen is telling us a nice clean, picturesque story, and we think, yes, I know what a computer does. But actually, inside the computer, it's a whole other story. And most of us, unless we're technically trained in computer science, we really don't know that story at all. So, you see, that's a nice example, a neat example, to compare our human knowledge to reality. Our human knowledge is just what we can see on the display of our senses and what is going on in the speculations of our mind. And it has something to do with the reality beyond our thoughts and perceptions, but what exactly it has to do, none of us can honestly say. It's simply not possible. So, again, this is bringing us back to the point of ignorance, you see. So, science, this quantum mechanical science, is what we can say about nature, according to Niels Bohr. It is not nature itself. That's a very important point. Now I want to go from this example of quantum physics to philosophy in general. And this is a quite easy jump, because it turns out that many scientists say that these waves, the wave function of matter, is actually waves of knowledge or waves of mind, because these waves are probability waves, which are mathematically calculated. So that is something that exists in the mind of the scientists, these probability waves, you see. And maybe the particles are actually out there. Maybe, even scientists will argue about that. Some of them say even the particles are not objective. But suppose, we'll, just for argument's sake, say the particles are objective. So what we have is waves of knowledge, or waves of calculation. This is the speculation where the particle might be, and the particle itself. So the particle is something we observe, it's sense data, or in other words, matter. And the waves of knowledge, that is the mind. And separating these two is also a big philosophical problem, how they come together. What really is matter? Can you have a mind without sense data at all? How does sense data exist without minds observing it? These are big problems in philosophy. And what it comes down to is, again, what we can say. Not what is, what we can say. And there's one, it's kind of a cute statement about the relationship between mind and matter. What is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind. That's what it really comes down to. It's kind of like we chase our words in a circle. We end up, we start off trying to talk about mind, and we end up talking about what we see in this world, sense data. We try to talk about sense data, and we end up talking about what we think about it. So we just go around in a circle. So this is what philosophy, particularly Western philosophy, has turned out to be. It's speculation, it's logic, it's rhetoric. It's what we can say about the problems of our existence. But whether what we can say has anything to do with the reality, that nobody can really say. At least within the context of Western philosophy, of the tools that Western philosophy uses in order to discuss the problems of the world. Those are clearly human tools. We rely upon our human sense perceptions. We rely upon our human mental speculations, our human language. And so, we can say what we can say, but we cannot really say what is. So, this mind-matter or mind-body duality, it manifests in philosophy in these two very old tendencies. I think today they're not actually well-defined schools of thought like they used to be, but these two tendencies still exist. Empiricism and rationalism. So empiricism, it's a tendency to take the side of sense data. Seeing is believing. You see? Show me, then I'll believe it. Don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me what what you suppose is going on. Show me some proof, and then I'll believe it. And rationalism is the idea that things have to be worked out intellectually. The world has to be brought under a coherent understanding or explanation. So these two things, they get along and they don't get along. They're never really at ease with each other, although in science today, scientists, for example, they try to use both empiricism and rationalism. But there's always a kind of flashpoint between the two. They're not exactly fitting together. So this is because each one uses a different theory of knowledge. So in empiricism, the theory is called the correspondence theory. And that simply means that the words I use should correspond to things that we can experience. The word empiricism comes from the Greek empira, which means to experience. So if I'm going to use a term like a white piece of chalk, then in order for this term, white piece of chalk, to make sense, there has to be something I can show you. Here is a white piece of chalk. Those words, that term, correspond to this. And empiricists become very uncomfortable when words go away from that which can be presented to the senses, that which can be, say, verified by instruments as being actually real. Now, this may sound very down-to-earth and practical, but it is shot through with very big problems. Like, for example, you see, again, the idea here is correspondence theory of truth. The attempt is objectivity. You see, again, this is an object. So I should speak in terms of objects, physical objects. Then I will be able to tell you the truth. And this is very important in law, in court trials and so on and so forth. They look for physical evidence to make their decisions upon. But, you see, this objectivity is a kind of narrowing of our experience of our life. For example, pain. Now, if I ask you what pain is, you'll all be able to tell me what it is. You've all experienced pain. But can anyone show a pain? There's no medical instrument, no dolometer, for example. I think that would be the word they would give it, dolometer. There's no such thing as a dolometer that you can attach it to your nerves and it will show a reading of pain. And even if it could, that needle moving like this, jerking like this, is that pain? A needle jerking back and forth? Is that pain? Or some reading, a printout of some lines going like that, is that pain? You see? So this is a big problem. Pain, we all know what it is. It's all, very, very important to us. You start feeling pain inside and it doesn't go away, you go to a doctor. That's a very serious thing. But pain doesn't correspond. Pain doesn't correspond to empiricism. Pain doesn't fall within this correspondence theory of truth. So you see, empiricism, this attempt to be down to earth, very practical, very, precise, it falls short of what's really going on in life. Then you have rationalism. This is the attempt to bring all experiences, as all of our empirical experiences, sensory experiences, under a hierarchy of ideas that will explain. Because this is another problem with empiricism. Empiricism doesn't really explain things. It just gives names to things, but doesn't explain why they're there. You see? Doesn't explain what the point of it all is. This is what rationalism attempts to do. So it attempts to bring all experience under one overarching explanation or theory. And this too is problematic. One of the great rationalist philosophers is Immanuel Kant, for example, very influential. And his way of thinking is still respected today, but in detail it's totally obsolete. He tried to give his rational explanation of phenomena of his time in the 1700s, according to the science of that time, and all of that is now obsolete. So when we read Kant today, there's a lot of things you just have to, you come to and you just kind of chuckle. Wow, that's pretty primitive idea of things, and you turn the page. There's so much. So this is the problem with rationalism too. It's another human attempt to bring order to a world that is always changing, you see, and our minds are also always changing. So in this way, all these rationalist ideas, they get left behind. They become obsolete, and we attempt to come up with new ones to fit our time, our place, our circumstance. But nothing stands, nothing lasts. So these ideas of knowledge are also known in Vedanta. They're given names in Sanskrit: Pratyakshavada, Anumanavada. Pratyaksha, Prati-aksha. Aksha means the eyes. The eye, which represents all the senses. Prati means to come near to. So information that is brought nearest to the senses. And Vada means ism. So this is empiricism. Anuman, man means mind, anu means to focus. So we focus the mind on things, and that is another kind of Vada-ism. And this is used, Pratyaksha and Anuman, or empiricism, rationalism, is to some extent used in Vedanta, but it is considered an inferior process of knowledge. Whereas, as far as I know, in Western philosophy, for the most part, at least in more modern times, empiricism and rationalism is all we have. There is no further process of knowledge that is known. So, in Vedanta, the real standard of knowledge is called Shabda Brahma. So Brahma means spiritual. Shabda means sound. And this is referring back to the Vedas. The Vedic texts actually are considered not to be formulated by human beings. The Vedic texts are the ancient and original knowledge of the universe that exists as vibration behind everything. So in science today also there's this idea that, I mentioned it here, as the more you break down matter, the more you come to this vibration, wave function, so on and so forth. So this is a similar kind of notion that ultimately everything is vibration, and that vibration carries a meaning, and that meaning is transcendental. It's beyond human powers of perception and speculation. So therefore the Vedas are given a special authority over what we see and what we think. Now, there is something like this authority in ancient Western philosophy. I'm thinking of the first sage, Greek sage, who used the term philosopher or philosophy, and that was Pythagoras. He lived even before Socrates and Plato. And he was a sort of a mystic. he was, of course, we remember him today for his geometry, the geometry of triangles and things like that, numbers. But more than that, he was actually a mystic. He had theories of harmonics. He was also coming to this point of sound, vibration. And so he understood the universe to be an arrangement of harmonics. Interesting. Although it's not very clear because the records of what Pythagoras taught are very incomplete. So his disciples and grand-disciples, they were known to quote him as the authority. People would ask them questions, and they would just say, "Our master has said, da, 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 da." That's how they would answer. So this has come into Western philosophy under the term ipse dixit, which is a Latin term. It's kind of derogatory. It's kind of a put-down. That, oh, the master has said. You just quote authority. You don't really understand. Perhaps you don't understand it yourself. You're just repeating words. So that's, as I said, it's kind of a minimization. So in Western philosophy, this resorting to an absolute authority that cannot be questioned is not so much respected. But I want to say that the concept of Shabda Brahma, yes, it has authority, but there's much more to it than just repeating what one has heard. Actually, Shabda Brahma has a great similarity with another ancient Greek concept, philosophical concept, logos spermatikos it is called. Logos means word, and spermatikos means seeds. So that the universe is seeded with an original reason, an original purpose, an original intellect. And that's why matter takes the form that it does. Matter acts as it does because it is guided by this principle of reason. Otherwise, matter by itself, it is just inert. But when it is combined with this reason, all-pervading reason, then it takes shape. So this is an idea that is there in the Vedas and Vedanta. And so, as I said, the Vedic sound is said to be expressing this original sense of things, this original purpose of things. The very reason why matter takes the shape it does. In other words, the purpose of the universe, the actual plan of the cosmos itself, is understood to be expressed in the Vedic sound. But this sound is being spiritual. You see, it is on a level higher than we're able to comprehend. We human beings, we have the capacity also for the same reason, because we are conscious beings. We are actually considered in the Vedic point of view to be eternal, spiritual beings. And we belong to this same transcendental nature that is giving shape to the universe. But the problem is that we have fallen into what the Vedas call Maya, illusion. We have become captivated by our minds and our senses, these bodies, which are actually coverings of the soul. So the mind tends to delude us subtly, you see, in a subtle way. It deludes our ideas, it deludes our thought processes, our understanding, our knowledge. And matter, or the physical body, tends to delude our perceptions. So those in beings who are in Maya, then, they accept what their deluded minds and their deluded senses tell them. They don't really come to the point of questioning that. Questioning their own thought processes and questioning their own perceptions. Could there be something higher than this? Could there be something more real than this? You see, so this is the definition of someone who's in Maya, someone who's in illusion, who just accepts the way things are, you see, and works with that. So, therefore, in this present condition, we're not able to understand this Shabda Brahma, this spiritual sound, even if we hear it. This is why you see many persons, very intelligent persons, particularly scholars from the West who have looked at the Vedas. They've taken the trouble to learn Sanskrit and to translate the Vedas. But they come to the conclusion that the Vedas they give it terms like mythology, and I think that's pretty much the catch-all word that's used, mythology. So mythology means, yes, it's a very interesting literature, very well written, very poetic, very, very sophisticated grammatically, and all of that. But actually, what it's saying is not really true. Now, there's a great deal of assuming in that, you see. How can someone who himself is not able to say what is true, how can he say whether something written several thousand years ago is true or not? How can he say that? If you ask him, well, you say the Vedas are not true, so what is true? What is reality? Well, that's a problem for us human beings to say with certainty. So this mythology is, in many cases, it's just kind of a cover for our own ignorance. It's easy to label something mythology, something you don't understand. Just call it mythology. It's just some ancient old stories. They don't make any sense. Never mind. So this is the problem when we try to hear and understand or read and understand the Vedas from our present point of view. It's something like if you happen to find a paper on some abstract mathematical problem written in all the symbols that the mathematicians use, and here and there there's a few words you recognize, like is or therefore or equals, or and then it's many, many pages, and you look through it, and then you just throw it aside. Oh, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make any sense to you, but to the person who wrote it, to the person who's absorbed in this discipline, it makes a lot of sense. So we are separated from the Vedas by time and by space, and also by our own mentality and our own perception of things. So therefore, to understand the Vedas properly, Vedic message Vedanta, requires, I think you all know this word, yoga. There are different kinds of yoga, but I mean just in a very general sense, yoga as a spiritual discipline for self-purification. And this again is why there are these traditional sampradayas or schools of Vedantic thought. In these schools, that necessary discipline of yoga is practiced, so that our thinking and our perceptions are purified, so that we can begin to better understand the actual meaning of the Vedas and the Vedanta philosophy. So what I've told you so far is by way of introduction, just an introduction to Vedanta with reference to Western philosophy. Now I want to go from here into one of the essential concerns of Vedanta philosophy. I don't know if any of you have done any reading in Vedanta, but if you do, you're very likely to come across what are called the 5 koshas, or the 5 levels of awareness. This is found in the Upanishads. The Upanishads are philosophical texts which belong to the category of Vedanta. There are many, many Upanishads. And all these Upanishads are summarized in another word called the Vedanta Sutra, which means the Vedanta encoded. It's a kind of all of the philosophy of Vedanta in code form, in the form of very simple, concise statements. So in these literatures, then the issue of the 5 levels of consciousness is a great concern. So I thought this would be very useful. You can actually say today that you learned Vedanta philosophy to some extent, one of the major issues of it. So we'll start from the outside here. Annamaya. Anna, literally, look it up in the Sanskrit dictionary, means rice. Rice grains. In general, it means food. And Maya, in this sense, means like a level of energy. So this is where we start. When we are born as human beings, we are born predominantly into this Annamaya kosha. This kosha means a covering of consciousness, which is concerned with anna, with food. What does a baby want? Newborn baby wants food, wants to drink the milk of the mother, is always crying for food. This is how a baby is pacified. The mother takes it to her breast or puts this plastic nipple in the mouth, and then the baby is quiet. So we retain this Annamaya consciousness to some degree throughout our whole life. We have this physical body, we feel the urge of hunger, we work largely to eat. You see, in this world, people work, get jobs, earn money, largely to eat, largely to keep the refrigerator well stocked. So this is very much still with us, even as we grow out of babyhood. But we can see in babyhood, this is the predominant concern, and also in what we call lower forms of life. From the Vedanta point of view, animals and plants are also of the same essence as human beings. They're also spirit souls, spiritual beings. But they're in a more in this state of consciousness, which is a kind of much more physicalized consciousness, much more concerned with the body. So, Annamaya. And so we are conditioned by this. Our way of looking at the world is very, very much conditioned by this. But the Vedanta tells us that the soul itself, our pure and original state of being, does not need to be here. It's not that our life actually needs food to go on because we are eternal. But we have become very much conditioned due to our involvement in matter. We have become, so to speak, addicted to being in a body and addicted to eating and taking care of the body's needs. So if one can take to yoga, spiritual discipline, then one can rise up, pass through these states. The next state is pranamaya. Now prana means life force, and specifically refers to the life force that energizes the body and makes possible movement in the body. So this is kind of more developed state of still very physical consciousness or bodily consciousness. The pranamaya is all about movement, doing things, getting things accomplished, working. And perhaps we can see it very prominently, say in sports. Recently there was the Olympics. There's always a sports competition going on somewhere or other in the world. And this is taking up a lot of attention. And this is, very highly developed, even beautiful movements of the body for the attainment of what are considered great goals in that field. So this is pranamaya. And children, you see, from babyhood, then they develop into this too. As a young child gains control over its body, than he or she naturally wants to do. Different things with the body, playing games, run, ride a bicycle, so many things. This is all within pranamaya. Then manomaya. Manomaya means the state of level of mental activity. And so this is more developed, but it is still material, because the self and the mind are different. The mind is a conditioning of consciousness. It is a subtle mechanism. This is very essential to Vedanta philosophy, that there's gross matter and there's subtle matter. So the gross matter, yes, we're all very familiar. This is all gross matter. It's analyzed in the Vedas as solid matter, earth, or earthy matter, liquid matter, watery, gaseous matter, air, fiery matter, luminous matter, like that, fire, electricity. And then ether. Ether means space, the totality of space. So this is all considered to be gross. And then beyond that, there are the workings of manas, mind, and buddhi. Buddhi is the intellect which gives shape to the mind, which gives direction to the mind's functions. And even beyond that, there's something more subtle called ahankara, which means the false ego. The very sense of identifying with matter, either subtle or gross, as being myself. That myself is here in the material world. This is called ahankara. So in other words, gross and subtle matter. So manomaya is where one comes to work in the subtle realm of matter, with thoughts and with language and with ideas. And generally what we call material civilization is these three: annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya. And this is the human condition. Human beings, for the most part, are involved in these three. But beyond that, then there's what's called the Vijnanamaya Purusha. Purusha means person, personality. And Vijnan means discrimination. Discrimination, the seeing of the difference between reality and illusion. So this Vijnanamaya Purusha is the soul proper, the actual essence of our individuality. And this soul is pure consciousness. Pure consciousness. And does not depend on mind for its consciousness, does not depend actually on prana or ana for its energy, for its ability to do anything. The soul is totally transcendental to that. But as I said, it's by false identification. First of all, by this principle of ahankara I mentioned, by identification, attachment, that we become involved in these things. This is very much a good example, this common everyday example, is when you are watching a film. I think this is the best example, watching a film in a theater, because there you have a lot of elements in this example that I can compare to our state as human beings in this embodied consciousness. You see, when you're in a theater watching a movie, you're sitting in a seat, means you're not doing anything, you're just observing. And in order for you to enjoy the film, the lights, the house lights have to go down. The whole place has to become dark. You see? So this is compared to the ignorance that the soul accepts in order to be able to enjoy these things. He has to become ignorant of himself. When the lights go down, we are sitting in a seat in a theater, but we forget all that. We forget actually that we are there. Then the screen lights up, the movie credits start. You see MGM or whatever it is, and the show starts. And there before us is something representing a hero, a heroine, a bad guy, some adventure. And we get all engrossed in it. But what is it actually? It's Maya, it's illusion, you see. In actual fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger is not up there. What you're seeing is just an image of him, just light and color moving in front of your eyes. We're all putting this together in our mind. And we're identifying with it. You see, we're getting emotional. We're channeling our emotions into this illusion. And again, it's all possible because, first of all, we're sitting in darkness. So in actual fact, we have nothing to do with what's going on up there. We're completely different from it. We don't need this experience. But we're accepting it because we think it will make us happy. We think that this will, be an enjoyable hour and a half to sit and watch this movie. So this is something similar to gives us an indication of the state of the soul in its darkness, sitting in darkness and viewing this Manomaya, Pranamaya, Anamaya levels of existence and identifying with it and thinking, yes, I'm here. I'm here, I'm down here. Actually, the soul is always up here. So, Vijnanamaya means that consciousness comes up to this level so that one can actually see the difference between the spiritual self, who I really am, and the rest. The mind, the body, the world outside. One actually sees, just like, again, in the theater, in the middle of the movie, if for some reason the lights come on, of course nobody likes that. Everyone starts to complain. But if the lights do suddenly come on, then the illusion is dispelled. And you're again aware, I'm sitting in this seat in a theater, here I am. And this is just a dream on the screen. This is not real. So this is what Vijnanamaya refers to. Now, but this is not enough. I can refer again to this